All right, guys, welcome into my 2023 NFL predictions for free agency. We've got multiple veteran quarterbacks that are going to be free agents. I've got multiple trade predictions on this list, and I believe there are 14 total that I want to go through. So starting, Tom Brady. Everyone's wondering what's going to happen to him. I've got him going to Vegas on a 2-year deal with a player option after 1 year and signing around a $12 to $15 million deal because Vegas has multiple high-level contracts: Devontae Adams, Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow. The reason Brady would go to Vegas is because of those options. You've got multiple elite pass catchers. You do have the Josh Jacobs situation where it looks like they're not going to be able to re-sign him. Guys, I think with Brady, there's only really two options. Either stay in Tampa Bay, which honestly does seem pretty viable considering that division is still terrible, and you would think the Bucs would be significantly improved next year with a healthy offensive line. They've invested into their receivers. They've invested into their offensive line. They were just injured this past year. But if Brady does leave the Bucs, this is just like a prediction video. I'm trying to have fun. I would say the Raiders would be an ideal fit. Also, if Aaron Rodgers demands a trade, I would think the Vegas Raiders, based on their roster, would be a fit. You can say they have defensive issues. Well, they really only have secondary problems. And if you're getting well, actually, you probably would have to give up your first-round pick to get Aaron Rodgers. But if you get Tom Brady for free because he's a free agent, you have the number 7 overall pick. You can trade for an elite cornerback or an elite safety. You've already got elite pass rushers. Max Crosby signed to an extension. And also Chandler Jones. So I think if I'm Brady, I'm either staying in Tampa Bay or I might look at the Raiders. The argument against Vegas would be that's a very tough division with Denver probably improving. Russell Wilson had a really bad year, but you still have Justin Herbert and Mahomes in that division. So we will see. Saquon resigns with the Giants. This one, probably a 4-year deal, maybe a 5-year extension. Not surprising at all. Saquon needed a healthy year. He's really running well for the Giants in the playoffs. They've had such a great season with Brian Daboll. They finally have the fan base back on their side, and I certainly think they will get an extension done with Saquon, not just because he's had a great year, but also they've got so much invested into him. The number 2 overall pick, they're not going to lose him for nothing. I do wonder if they can franchise tag. Well, you know what? I don't think they'll franchise tag him because I think they're going to franchise Daniel Jones, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But Saquon, I do think they work out an extension. If I'm the Giants, I would really love a 3 or a 4-year extension because I'm not interested in committing 4 or 5 years. But if the market dictates it, because Saquon is a very valuable pass catcher, they might have to give him a 4 or 5 year extension, maybe a 5-year extension with the 5th year being a team option. That would be an ideal situation for the Giants. Derek Carr goes to the Bucs on a 3-year deal. So the situation with the Raiders, they can cut him, they can try and trade him. If they can't trade him, they do have to end up cutting him more than likely because it seems like Derek Carr and Vegas are finally headed for a divorce after a few underwhelming seasons there. If Tom Brady does leave the Buccaneers, I could see Derek Carr landing on his feet there. You've also got the Commanders as an option if you are Derek Carr, but the Bucs really do have a solid offense. Again, they were just injured among the offensive line. You still have Mike Evans you've committed to. You still have Chris Godwin. The running game was not good, but if I'm Derek Carr, I really look at the Bucs. Also, maybe a team like the New Orleans Saints might be interesting, but they currently have, they always seem to have major salary cap issues. They will probably be cutting Michael Thomas this offseason. So, Derek Carr, I would say if Tom Brady leaves the Bucs, I would look at the Bucs to try and replace him with Derek Carr if the Raiders can't find a suitable trade partner, which they probably won't be able to because of Derek Carr's contract. They're going to have to cut him. and then Carr goes to the Bucs. Next, I've got Lamar Jackson going back to the Ravens on a 6-year extension. It just seems like all of the players in the Baltimore locker room want Lamar Jackson back. The Ravens are going to look around. It's very hard to find another franchise quarterback. Yes, you could franchise tag Jackson and trade him probably for 3 first-round picks at the minimum, but you have a roster right now that really is ready to win the Super Bowl. You've got an elite defense. You have J.K. Dobbins. You really just need one elite receiver. And I almost wonder if the Ravens decide to go all in this coming season, if they have the salary cap for it, they re-sign Lamar Jackson, and then they trade a second-round pick for DeAndre Hopkins. I'm not, because they did just sign Roquan Smith to a massive deal. I don't know if they'll have the salary cap for that, because DeAndre Hopkins has a huge deal. Lamar Jackson's going to be getting a huge deal if they re-sign him, but I do think the Ravens have to make a legitimate effort to get Lamar Jackson a real number one receiver, and I do hear the criticism that they have. Honestly, they've gotten Lamar a few first-round receivers, Hollywood Brown, Bateman, but let's see if we can get him an actual legit number one. You get J.K. Dobbins back healthy. You know, Lamar should be rested. He should get his extension. He's going to be ready to go next year. And the Ravens, legitimately, because of how good their defense is, if they get a number one receiver paired with Mark Andrews and J.K. Dobbins, they could be a Super Bowl contender. I think the Ravens realize it's just so hard to find a franchise quarterback. And even though you are taking a chance on Jackson because he's a running quarterback and his health, it's worth taking that chance than going with the unknown when you have such a good roster already that's built for a Super Bowl. Number 5, the Saints get a new QB, and then I put via draft as a question mark. So there's a lot of stuff going on with the New Orleans Saints. They have issues with their salary cap. They need a new quarterback. You're not going into next year with Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston as your number 1 and your number 2. There is a clause that I read where they can cut Michael Thomas and save a bunch of money by June 1st if they cut him. And they do have Chris Olave as a really good receiver, so they might try and do that to save money. The issue with the Saints is they need to find a quarterback, but they don't have their first-round pick. But they do have Sean Payton. They still have Sean Payton. They can trade him for a first-round pick. There are a few teams that might want to do that. And then do you get a mid-first-round pick for Sean Payton? Would you then try and move up in the draft and draft a C.J. Stroud and draft a Bryce Young? I don't think you can get that high because you don't have enough assets in terms of trade capital. But the Saints, whether it's Derek Carr, Jimmy G, would they go after someone like Baker Mayfield, who's ever floating around out there and is kind of a solid quarterback? I'm guessing the Saints are going to be in on them. Again, you just can't go into next year with Jameis and Andy Dalton. You're not going to be competitive. You're not really rebuilding, but you're also not a bad team if you are the Saints. The issue is they have all these massive contracts with Michael Thomas, Marshawn Lattimore, the offensive linemen, and it's really sinking them. And they always have to play Russian roulette trying to get under the salary cap. Number 6, Daniel Jones back to the Giants on the franchise tag. So if I was the Giants, I would be very skeptical with Daniel Jones. I'm not giving him a 5 or a 6 year big time extension. I would do the franchise tag and make him prove again next year that he can replicate this and he is a franchise quarterback. And even if I am offering Daniel Jones a long-term contract extension, it would come in the form of there being a team option after 2 or 3 years. In essence, I'm not committing 5 or 6 years to Daniel Jones, even though that's what the contract might say. I'm really committing 2 years with a team option if he keeps playing well. Now, would Daniel Jones accept it? I don't know, but I am not interested in giving Daniel Jones a full 5 or 6 year extension. I know he's been great. He was basically a top 10 quarterback this past year, but he needs to prove it again. That's probably why I tag him and avoid giving out a crazy extension with a long-term commitment if I am the Giants. Jimmy G to the Commanders with a question mark. I just have no clue what the Commanders are going to do at the quarterback position. There is speculation that they might try and trade up for Anthony Richardson, the Florida quarterback, to where even if they get Anthony Richardson, he's not starting week 1. I mean, he is really raw. So the Commanders are, it's like Derek Carr, it's Jimmy G. Is it one of those guys for Washington? Is that who they go after? It seems kind of sad if you are the Commanders, because you've been in this purgatory where you're basically 500 every season or just below 500. You never get a top 5 pick, so you're never able to draft the CJ Stroud, the Bryce Young, but you're also not good enough to really contend for a Super Bowl. So the Commanders, it seems like it's kind of the next version of Carson Wentz, Taylor Heineke. Go after Jimmy G, get like a mid-level decent quarterback. They should be even better next year with a healthy Chase Young, but what does that even represent? Does that make them 9-8? Maybe 10-7? I don't know. My next predictions, Tony Pollard going back to the Cowboys. It would just be shocking if Dallas lets Tony Pollard go with what he's shown as a dynamic pass catcher and a runner. He is the number 1 running back in Dallas at this point. It is shocking. With Zeke, I mean, these running backs like Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, these guys are washed at the age of 27. It's remarkable. And there's a situation where the Cowboys might try and restructure with Zeke. They can cut him and save $8 million, but it also creates $6 million in dead money, which I'm sure they don't want to do. So there's going to be some type of restructure with Zeke, I'm guessing, and you cannot let Tony Pollard go if you're Dallas. He's just too dynamic. He makes too many plays. He's too much of an asset for your offense, so I think they re-sign him. Daron Payne to the Bears. So the Bears have the most cap space out of anyone, and I think they splurge a little. Daron Payne is the second best defensive tackle available in free agency, and this would really help their defense. Of course, the Bears are in a spot where they probably need to add another receiver. They do have the number 1 overall pick. The expectation is they will probably trade down unless they fall in love with Will Anderson and just have to pick him. They'll probably trade down and get more assets and really try and help their full team, both their offense and their defense. Aaron Rodgers back to the Packers again. So I think Aaron Rodgers made an egregious mistake of giving up his leverage by signing a 3-year contract extension last offseason. If you're 39 years old, why are you committing for 3 years as a free agent? If I was Aaron Rodgers, I would have, and you really wanted to re-sign with the Packers, I would have done a 2-year deal with a player option after 1 season to where I have full control every year and I can really bully the team that I am on to either go get a receiver. I can threaten them. I can say, I'm leaving if you don't get me weapons. Aaron Rodgers signs a 3-year extension at the age of 39. He gives up all leverage. They control the next 2 years. You can demand a trade, but they don't have to grant it. And even if they do grant it, they can trade you wherever they want. So I think Aaron Rodgers has made a number of dumb decisions this late in his career where if you're a free agent at age 38, why are you re-signing with a team that refuses to draft receivers in the first round even after trading their number 1 receiver, Devontae Adams, for a first-round pick? It just makes no sense to me. So I think Aaron Rodgers, he goes back to Green Bay. That is a relatively easy division. I know Minnesota was good this year, but they're going to have to allocate a ton of money to re-signing Justin Jefferson, and they had a lot of close, fluky wins, so that is a very winnable division, and that's why if I was Aaron Rodgers, I mean, they need a receiver. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is too old for this, to be playing with rookies and stuff, but, that's how it's set up right now in Green Bay. Michael Thomas to the Bears. So like I was saying, I think the expectation is that the Saints at this point can cut Michael Thomas and save a bunch of money. The contract has been a total disaster. He's been injured. But if I was the Bears, I would take a flyer on him. He is such a great, if he is healthy, he is such a great safety valve for a young quarterback like Justin Fields. So if Michael Thomas is available and I was the Bears, I would look at him. Baker Mayfield back to the Rams. I think it's possible Baker goes back to the Rams on a 1-year deal to play under Sean McVay and be Matt Stafford's backup quarterback. You could also see Baker looking at a team like the Commanders and maybe trying to get a starting spot there, or a team like the Saints. But, Matt Stafford is old. We don't really know what's going on with him. He's been injured. Maybe if you're Baker, you go back to the Rams and continue to learn under McVay and maybe get a shot. Geno Smith gets a 3-year deal with the Seahawks. So if you're Seattle, I think, Geno being like a top 7 or top 8 QB this year, it's very odd. It's very rare to see a quarterback be so bad for so long and then virtually become elite. But that's what happened with Geno. So I believe the Seahawks will give him around a 3-year extension based on his age, based on his poor history. There's not going to be a massive 5 or 6 year commitment. And I do think Geno Smith likes being in Seattle, and he will take a 3-year extension. And then this one, just a random prediction. I do think the Colts trade up to number 1 and they draft probably, either CJ Stroud, Will Levis, or Bryce Young. Very likely Bryce Young, but the Colts are the team right now that I think will probably take the initiative. And if I'm Chicago, it does make sense to move from 1 to 4 to where you very likely still get either Jalen Carter or Will Anderson. And could you imagine if you get Payne and Jalen Carter? I mean, that duo on the interior for at least 3 or 4 years, that is an ultra elite defensive line duo. So that is just some free agent predictions here for the NFL 2023 offseason, guys. That's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.